Hello and welcome to the final day of the Unsourced Wall Christmas Carol-A-Thon. I saved, well, the most recent for last. There might have been a couple of dozen released since I recorded this, but we can only save those for next year. For now, we're going to take a look at the brand new Apple TV Plus release musical comedy Spirited, starring Ryan Reynolds and Will Ferrell. And let's just jump into it. First things first, Spirited is told through the point of view of Will Ferrell's Ghost Christmas present, who works for a corporation whose sole purpose is to pull Christmas carols to get people to change. This is a kind of concept that's been done so many times before, and it's not that strange to see here. Santa and the Elves get this treatment a bunch of times, and hell, it's not even the first time Christmas carols as a job has been done before either. And the movie starts off somewhat interestingly, as we see them complete a haunt and get an idea of how they plan out doing these carols. It's not really all that groundbreaking, but the little details and wrinkles here and there are fun, and make it stand out. I especially enjoyed seeing the ghosts just kind of like stalking Reynolds' Scrooge character. It's a blunt gag, but it's a good one. And that's really where my compliments start to taper off. I want to get this off my chest. The movie could have been way better than it was. And that means the movie is kind of okay-ish, but it's definitely not something I would call good. Spirit is a musical comedy that sporadically fails at filling either of those genres. Musical sequences are strewn about all over the place, nonsensical topical lyrics are awkwardly placed in the songs ostensibly about Christmas, and a musical is good when you have the characters themselves complain about how many musical numbers there are, and I don't blame them. The lazy lyrics and seeming intent of jamming as much inconsequential numbers as it can means that a lot of the songs are just filler, time wasters, and they leave no impact or impression, which leaves you, the audience, feeling really bored and deflated. As for the comedy, it's kind of a coincidence I mentioned a few things in my Scrooge review. In that review, I talked about how some people like to categorize Scrooge as a parody, but that movie, while being self-aware, knew how to keep the emotional core intact and treat the storyline with heart and being genuine. Spirited is kind of not that. It's a parody, of course, but it's the kind of parody that feels like adding nonsensical and irrelevant jokes and straightening on the narrative to make room for those. And that's not really how you do a parody. You do a parody by actually having a funny take, and so it would have been fun to see an actual periodic take on a Christmas Carol that made jokes and was self-aware enough about itself. Which is ironic, given that it also includes a jab at Scrooge, and all that really holds the film back. It's become so uninterested in telling anything that resembles the actual story, and this extends beyond the fact that the POV character is one of the ghosts. I understand that you can expect things to shift around when you're following one of the ghosts and their own emotional character arc, but doesn't really care all that much about that either, not outside the very utilitarian purpose of this movie needing something resembling emotional stakes or emotional core. Its main focus is on edgy topical humor. When it gets to any actual Carol stuff, it just whizzes by in a flash. And that's a shame, because Reynolds and Ferrell aren't bad in their roles, they're just badly used. As much as I think the jokes are lame and unfunny, their chemistry is really good, and when a movie slows down to actually do a real gag that has anything to do with Christmas Carol, or to treat a scenario from the book with any kind of sincerity, you see what this movie could have been. But it fights itself too often, is too overstuffed, and everything becomes underserviced as a result. Also, Reynolds is no Hugh Jackman. He can't showman these dance scenes. And that's really where I would end the review, but then the movie does something that I didn't expect. I mean, I guessed it, but it still did it in a way where it felt like it was going to commit. Exactly halfway through, the movie pivots. It gets a slightly better balance about what it wants to be. It's maybe a little too late for it to have actual impact and feeling, but it fulfills more of its potential. And the final act is actually something I would say is pretty unique, and does a couple of things that are quite shocking. I feel like that might be part of its intent to overcompensate for lacking in the first two acts, but I think it still works, and it's honestly something that I didn't really see coming, and I admire the gall. Because if there's one thing I learned from watching 12 versions of the Christmas Carol in a row, is that none of them are ever going to be perfect, or conform to the same thing. There's only going to be some little wrinkle that's different. And they really should have the more things that are different, because this is such a versatile story, and I'm glad to see all these changes. Because if they were all the same, it would just be boring. And even the weaker ones can surprise you. So yeah, Spirited, it's a terrible comedy, lackluster, uninventive musical sequences that are overproduced, but still, it brings something new to the table. I wish it cared more about the actual Christmas Carol story. As you can see, I didn't mention like Nephew Fred or anything like that, or Tiny Tim. There are elements to that within Spirited, but they're so sidelined and so underdeveloped that they're not even worth mentioning. And overall, I wouldn't recommend this, but someone out there is going to watch it, and who knows? It might just make their roster of favorite Christmas movies. Anyway, 6 out of 10. And I want to say thank you so much for joining me on this Christmas Carol-A-Thon. I know I played a lot of the hits, a lot of these were period pieces. If I do this again next year, I'm going to pick some really wild ones because there's a couple that caught my eye and I was like too late. I already made my list up, like a Nashville Christmas Carol. What is that about? So stay tuned for next year. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. Leave a like, comment below. I might be posting a ranking if I have time, but holiday weekend. So have a great holiday season and have a good one. See you again next time.